yet we're really behind the scenes saying, these are some processes that we have found that work. So we're really there to advise and serve as a resource to all of you. We also provide continuity to the senates and the committees from year to year. As people turn over, we're the ones which are that consistent presence to help transition from the end of one academic year to the start of the next. We also do provide administrative and technical support. So that includes scheduling, helping set agendas in consultation with committee and Senate chairs, doing the minutes, managing Zoom, and other things. And we also act as liaisons between committees and senates. So, for example, the Senate staff meets every morning and for 45 minutes for check-ins. And in that time, we will talk about issues that may come up through each of the senates or the committees. If we find that there may be some shared issues or some synergies that are possible, we will work behind the scenes to get people in touch so that they can help move their work forward jointly. So next slide, please. And here I believe I turn it over to Bobby.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Bobby Erickson, and I'm the Deputy Director in the Senate office. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about how shared governance is effective at the university. And I'm also going to highlight some of the things that you'll likely see on Senate dockets, especially if you're new. So the first bullet point, take legislative action on behalf of constituents. One of the main functions of the Senate is to review and vote on legislative action that is introduced to the Senate either by individual authors, individual senators, or by a Senate committee that's been working on something in their committee meetings. We'll talk more about what legislative action is later in the presentation, but just so you know, the main three actions are a statement, a resolution, or a letter. And when these actions are scheduled to be presented to the Senate, all of the relevant materials that you will need will be in the docket and will be sent out to you prior to the meeting. So please take the time to understand these documents, to ask clarifying questions on the Senate floor, and to make sure you're voicing your opinion. The second is to participate in meaningful policy reviews. So all administrative policies are required to go through a 6-year review, and Board of Regents policies are also reviewed regularly. And when these policy reviews happen, what happens is the policy owners will consult with relevant Senate committees on the changes, and some of those policies will actually also end up on the Senate docket. When they go to the Senate docket, they'll be discussed and most likely voted on. So when you see a policy review scheduled on the docket, please try to review the materials. Generally, there's going to be a document with proposed policy changes that you'll be able to look at. So you can see where the changes are going to be, and make sure that if you have questions about your policies, the policies that you speak up, because someone else probably has the same question that you do. So make sure that you're using your voice there. The third bullet point is to provide input on initiatives at the senior administrative level. So another thing that you're going to see is oftentimes administrators will visit with the Senate to have a discussion or ask for a vote to endorse a new initiative that the administration is working on. And this is an important time for you as a senator to review the docket, to talk to your constituents, and then to provide feedback either on behalf of your constituents or on behalf of yourself on the Senate floor about these initiatives. So it's important for you to be well informed about anything on the docket before you take a vote. And then the fourth one is to gather information and bring constituent concerns to the Senate. So as a senator, you are going to have more information about university operations than a lot of other people at the university. So it's important that you keep others around you informed and gather feedback and bring it to the Senate so that everyone can have a discussion together. So those are a few things about how governance works here at the U. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. And I'll hand it over to Missy.
Thank you, Bobby. Hi, everyone. I'm Missy Juliet, a Senate Associate in the University Senate office. And we've talked about the structure of governance and how it can be effective. Now we'll shift to how governance can facilitate change and what legislative action is. There are informal and formal channels. And the first step, as Bobby had touched on, is gathering information. So meeting with committees, senates, and key ex officio members to give you the opportunity to gather information on the next course of action and to collaborate with others. The second way to move things along is discussion and consultation with other committees so you can collaborate. Both of these approaches are informal, and a lot of times things can be resolved without moving to a legislative action. So now let's focus on legislative action. Once you have gathered information and gone through consultation, you'll work with committee members and your Senate staff person to determine the type of legislative action. And then from there, working with your Senate staff person, it determines what groups that you would want to consult with and to go through the consultation process. So to sum up, a statement describes the committee's position on an issue. These are typically broad topics, could be national or global in nature. And if a statement is made, it is optional but recommended to forward the statement to the SCC for information for the Senate docket. Once these steps are completed, the statement is then posted on the committee's website and forwarded to the Senate docket. A letter outlines your position on an issue that may or may not request action to be taken. These are typically local issues that the university may be able to address, and a letter follows a similar process as a statement. The key difference is that the letter is forwarded to the addressee, in addition to being posted on the web and forwarded to the Senate docket. And finally, a resolution calls for action from the university, and the administration must respond. This is the most complex process in governance, so it's crucial that you go through the consultation process. After the resolution is drafted, then it will go to the Senate to be voted on. If it is passed, the resolution is posted on the committee's website and forwarded to the appropriate administrator for a response. And this is how change happens at the University Senate. Next slide, please.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Amber Bathke. I am the Senate Associate who supports the University and Faculty Senate. So you have all received emails from me, and probably my name sounds familiar. I work with a couple other committees as well, but this is a large part of my job. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this new legislative action process and tracker that we've put into place. So some of you know that we've been developing these new resources. And if you're brand new, then this will be, you're at the same place as most people on this. So these new resources include advice on how to write a resolution, a submission form for legislative action, and a public-facing tracking system. I'll talk about those in a minute, but first I really want to talk about why we're instituting this system. So over the last year, maybe 2 years or so, especially since we've gone online, we've heard a lot of feedback, particularly from students, that the process for bringing legislative action, so resolution statements and letters through governance was not necessarily transparent or clear. So that kind of led to the perception that it wasn't consistently applied. We also learned that what we in the Senate office really view as consultation and consensus building was sometimes viewed as jumping through hoops. And so these resources are really intended to codify what previously existed largely in our brains in an upfront way where everyone can know what the process entails upfront, and that it's transparent and consistent, and everyone can see where everything is moving along through the process. It also helps us with record keeping and serves to showcase what's happening in governance. So as you can see on the slide here, I've got a screenshot of our homepage, and the legislative action tracker there. It's just got a window to that Google sheet that includes actions that are coming through the system right now. You can see that they're links. So when you click on that link, which you can do straight from the website, you can click through to the tracker. it'll take you to the text of the resolution. It'll take you to a Google form where you can provide feedback if you want to, and any other documents that may be kind of supporting documents for that action. So, so the new resources, and Jessica, can you stop sharing your screen for just a sec so I can share mine? I'm going to put up I'm going to put up the resources here. Sorry, 1 second. So this, oh no, no wonder. So this is our website, like I showed on the screen. Under resources here, you have resources for legislative action. And the ones that I want to show quickly are how to write a resolution. So while statements and letters are also very common, resolutions are the ones that are kind of trickier to write. And so we put together some advice on how to do that right here. So basically, a title and the main ask is the first paragraph, and then you can put supporting information later. There is also information about the path of a resolution, statement, or letter, both in text format and a handy flowchart. And then what I really want to point out is the legislative action submission form. So anyone who is looking to bring legislation through the governance system, whether it be a statement, letter, or resolution, we're asking to submit this form. And it just includes contact information, the name of the action, and a link to the text, some information about who it affects, what consultation you've planned or you've done, and who it affects, or what constituency it affects, so we know which Senate to go through, and some scheduling issues. So this form will trigger us, the Senate office, to enter the action into the legislative action tracker, put together that consultation plan, working with the consultative committee and the authors, and then really put that on the form where everyone can see it. And then if the action is going to be one that goes through a Senate, to the university or faculty Senate for a vote, we are sending out an email to committee chairs asking them to take a look at the action and let us know on the early side if their committee should weigh in on it. So Jessica, can you put the slides back up, please? I think that's it for my side. And then I'm passing it, I believe, to Chris after this.
Okay, next slide, please. Actually, I think it's me for this one.
Oh, yep, sorry.
No, that's okay. So we'd like to talk also a little bit about meeting effectiveness. So I know many of you are in, of course, many meetings, including this one. And so these tips could also perhaps be used for those as well. So the first thing really, especially with governance, is that, as we know, it can be very messy. It can be complex. We're dealing with a lot of issues across multiple groups and individuals across the university system. And if you have more than one person in a room, you are going to have conflict, and conflict is okay. It's actually expected, because otherwise we wouldn't have progress on things. And so really just even coming into the meetings, realizing that reasonable people may disagree on issues, I think may be a good starting point for especially when we know we're going to be dealing with some difficult issues or concerns. Related to that, it's also assuming positive intentions of all participants. So the one thing that we all have in common is that we're involved in our institution because we want to be good university citizens and work on the betterment of this institution. And so coming from that standpoint may also help as we're facilitating conversations moving forward. Also, Chris will be talking about this point a little bit more later on, but we'll want to be sure that during discussion that all remarks are addressed through the chair, and the chair ends up recognizing individuals to call on them for when somebody has a question or a comment. And doing this also provides greater inclusion for giving people the opportunity to speak, especially if they are individuals who may not naturally be speaking at meetings. And finally, it's maintaining focus on discussion topics. And again, it's especially if things get heated. I think for those of you who were part of University Senate last year, know that we did have some conversations that probably could have in hindsight been they could have taken place probably a bit more effectively. It's returning to why we're there and the discussion topics as compared to focusing on individuals. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Amber.
All right, just going to quickly go over some meeting logistics, most of which you have already experienced, so this should be pretty quick. But I do add meetings to Google Calendar, so if you don't have the meeting invite handy, you should always be able to just go to your calendar and the Zoom link will be on there. And I do link the docket once I send it as well, so everything should be right there. I do want to just let you know that first of all, I don't add the Zoom link right away. So if you look at like maybe the November meeting, I don't think it's there yet. Second of all, sometimes there are problems with System Campus email addresses with the Zoom, with the Google Calendar invite. So especially if you're on a System Campus, check to make sure that those meetings are on your calendar and let me know if you're having any issues. I send out the docket about 1 week before the meeting. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's not that early, but I really try to do that to give you time to read and prepare in advance because we know everyone is busy and we know that sometimes there's a lot to look at. We do our best, but please know that we try to get things out easy so you can look at it in time and contribute fruitfully to the discussion, but we also understand that everyone's busy. And then just quickly, the process for sending an alternate. So if you can't attend one of the meetings, you can send an alternate in your place and they will be able to access the Zoom link and vote and everything like that. So the process that we use for doing that is that there is a document that is linked from the emails that I send out regarding the docket. That document has some information about the process, such as where you can find information about who your alternates are if they are designated, and sometimes they're not. And then there's a Google form where you can submit the name of your alternate, the date of the meeting and whatnot. So I can make sure that they all get the Google Calendar invite. And again, the agenda is linked from that invite, but we also do ask you to forward the docket if you can. And finally, I mentioned briefly that sometimes there's a designated alternate and sometimes there's not. It varies by college for faculty senators, but there are some colleges that have elected alternates. And those, if you have them, should be listed on our website under this faculty senators tab. If you don't have a designated alternate, and this applies to everyone, you can ask anyone in your unit who is eligible for Senate service to in your same category, faculty, student, staff, to serve as your alternate. So hopefully that information is helpful. I do also have the alternate spreadsheet or the Google form linked from our resources page. So if you can't find the email, you can go look for it there and submit your alternate information that way. All right, I think that's it. Next slide, please.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Kwapik, and I also work with the University Senate Office. I'm just going to go over really quickly some of the procedures that we have for each of these Senate meetings. This might be very familiar to many of you, but for some of you, this is brand new. And so we just want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. As Amber was mentioning, she does send out dockets about a week ahead of time, and that includes the meeting agenda for these meetings. The chair is, who in this case is President Gable, and she usually chairs most of these meetings, helps to facilitate the entire meeting. So that means that she presents the items, she introduces speakers when appropriate, and just helps to facilitate to make sure we go through the entire agenda. Another thing that she will do is when it's appropriate for senators to ask questions or speak on particular items, she will recognize you, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. She really works with the parliamentarian of the Senate to make sure that all our rules and procedures are followed. We basically follow two resources when it comes to running these meetings. The first is our own constitution, bylaws, and rules that you can find on our website, as Amber pointed out before. And then we also do follow Robert's Rules of Order for kind of the way to actually run the meeting. So motions, voting, and other procedures typically follow those rules of order. The most common thing that we'll run into is usually voting on different motions. All motions are typically listed in the docket ahead of time, so you'll have an idea of what business will be conducted that day. In order to vote on any sort of item, we do have to make sure that we have a quorum, which is 50% plus one of our entire University Senate membership. And most votes, they typically pass by a simple majority, unless otherwise noted for like special rules and things like that, which we will actually have in a few moments. Next slide, please. So a couple of things on Zoom protocols and voting. So as you can imagine, when you have a group as large as up to 200 plus people, we have to make sure that we do conduct these meetings in somewhat of an orderly fashion. So you'll notice that you will have the inability to unmute yourself. We ask that you keep your video off by default, just so that we can handle bandwidth issues on a number of different ends. During the times when when the chair will ask for senator questions or comments, we ask that you use the raise hand function. Once the chair recognizes you, myself as host will unmute you and we'll ask you to turn on your video when recognized, at which point you'll have usually 2 minutes to make your comments. You will potentially see our clerk, Professor Rachna Shah. She makes sure that people stay on point for their 2-minute limit. So sometimes she'll duck in and say, you've got about 30 seconds left and things like that. So don't be startled if you see Rachna pop up here during the meeting. A couple things that we are just making asks of you, and we will remind you of this prior to each meeting with those opening introductory slides, is that if you have to raise a point of order, we ask that you use the chat system for that within the Zoom. You can send a chat directly to me or the other co-hosts, and I will be able to send that message to the chair to make sure that your point of order is recognized in an orderly fashion. Additionally, when we are having senator comments on particular issues, especially if we're looking at resolutions and things like that, we're asking that if you know you might be speaking in favor or against the particular resolution, that you also maybe send a chat to the host so that we can kind of have a balanced conversation on that. If you don't necessarily have an opinion on it, if you might be asking a question or comment, it just will help to facilitate the conversation as we go along. And finally, I want to talk about a new voting system. Now, I know a number of you actually received emails this morning. You should have all actually received emails for a new voting system that we're going to be using. It's run through a third-party system called Meeting Pulse. Unfortunately, we did a number of tests throughout the month of September and had what we thought was everything up and running until midweek, when Meeting Pulse kind of redesigned their interface, which led to some issues that we discovered this morning. So many of you noticed we are asking to just disregard those emails that you got this morning. Basically, we didn't want to bring anything to bear on this group without further testing to make sure that everything runs correctly. So for those of you who have been here before, we will continue to use the Zoom function polling feature for today's meeting, and we will go off that. Hopefully by our next meeting, we will have all the kinks worked out and be able to introduce it to you in a better fashion. Next slide, please.
That's it. So it looks like we have about 7 minutes, but who's counting for questions if anybody has any. President Gabel will call on you if you do, if you want to go ahead and use the raise hand feature.
Any questions for our wonderful Senate office team who did a great job? Thank you all very much. All right. So of course, if after you marinate in that, you have questions for the team, you now know how to get a hold of them. And I ask them questions all the time. So I can speak from personal experience in saying that they're incredibly helpful and responsive. So thank you all very much for that very helpful orientation. And now we can move on to our next item. So our next item is a motion to approve a special rule limiting each speaker to 2 minutes each time they're recognized. This is one of those that requires a 2/3 majority of those present and voting in order to approve the special rule. Is there any discussion? Okay, let's initiate the poll, and this will be our first new voting process.
So we'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 162 ayes, 5 nays, and 3 abstentions, that motion does prevail.
Okay, thank you. The next item concerns administrative responses to University Senate actions and is presented for information. We have one response that you can see in the materials if you would like to review on graduate student fees. The next item is a list of recent faculty, staff, and student deaths that have been forwarded for announcement to the Senate. I invite you to observe a moment of silence while I read these names. Ira Adelman, Marcia De Gaetano, Colleen Denny, Matthew Dion, Joanne Erickson, Dale Hammerschmidt, Mary Kelly, Chester Miracle, Michael Radke, Lisa Raduns, William Robb, Simo Sarkinen, Pauletta Sperry, Barry Stevens, Margaret Peggy Stewart, Andrew Vandeven, Clarence White, and amongst our students, Abdirahwan Ali, Maria Devine, Craig Killian, Austin Rederath, and Leonardo Yaurincella. Our next item is approval of the minutes from the University Senate meeting on April 21st. If we could initiate the poll on the motion to approve the minutes.
Give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 156 ayes, no nays, and 9 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, the next item is the president's report. So that's me, so I'll make the report. Good afternoon. Welcome to the first University Senate meeting of this academic year. Fall semester's in full swing, lots of energy, feels good, at least to me, and I hope very much the same for you. We have a very strong incoming class. It is the second largest of the modern era, last year's being the largest. Minnesotans are 7 out of every 10 students, and it is the most diverse class in our history. In the Twin Cities alone, there were more than 38,000 applications, which was a 6% increase over last year. And in Crookston, Morris, Duluth, Rochester, and the Twin Cities, we extend a very special welcome to all of our students. It's an absolute pleasure that they are here. And it's very nice to see all of you too. So we've had a good year against the strategic plan measures as well. Very strong 3rd year in a row for research, another record-setting year in philanthropy. Graduation rates are up to record highs, startups and patents are up. The diversity of the incoming class is a strategic plan measure. And we've also done some of the qualitative attributes, like launching PRISM, which is the President's Initiative for Student Mental Health. We launched the Native American Free and Reduced Tuition Program. The Rochester campus launched Next Gen Med, which was part of our distributed learning strategy. We have more Next Gen programs coming. The next one is Next Gen Ag, which is being stewarded in partnership between CFANS and the Crookston campus. Of course, we are delighted to see the Twin Cities US News rankings go up. I will say, for the record, that when rankings are good, we talk about them and how great they are. And when rankings are bad, we talk about why you can't count on them. But rankings are up. So we're in that good category. And of course, we're delighted. And there's a lot of homecoming sweeping across all of our campuses. Duluth and the Twin Cities this weekend, Morris and Crookston next weekend. So lots of good energy and a lot of hard work that goes behind that good energy. So a lot of appreciation for everything that has brought us to this phase in these last few years. We've also welcomed some new university leadership. So Dr. Mercedes Ramirez Fernandez joined us effective August 31st as our Vice President for Equity and Diversity. We also received a recommendation suggestion from Senate Finance and Planning to add Dr. Ramirez Fernandez to the budget 5. And she agreed to do that. I'm very delighted to report. So it's now, I guess, budget 6, although we may do it sort of like the Big 10 and not change the number, but we have added her to the budget 5 group, which will help us with work that I believe was already in place around making sure that the budgeting process is equitable and inclusive, but with real substantive expertise in the room. Dr. Shashank Priya will join us as the next Vice President for Research at the end of this month, just a few more days. And our Duluth Interim Chancellor, Dave McMillan, began his 2-year term on August 8th. So at the appropriate time, we'll bring new leaders to you for introductions. We also announced earlier this week the launch of the Morris Chancellor Search. I've already received a question about that, so I'll save the details on that for the Q&A portion when I respond to the question that we received. We've also done some work around institutional history, university history. Just as a reminder, the university namings and renamings policy was approved by the board in February, and that new policy includes a 75-year sunset provision for honorary namings. The purpose of this sunset provision was to acknowledge the historical significance of each naming, but also to acknowledge that our landscape should evolve to reflect current and future achievements. And so after a long and noteworthy period of acknowledgement for those who are honored, we make room for new accomplishments and new honorees. This work is very much with great appreciation in the hands of our All University Honors Committee. They've established a working group and they have established criteria. They have a very robust website FAQ that I would direct you to for details if you would like to take a look. But as an important next step, we start with our first group of namings. So the first 4 that are under consideration are Falwell Hall and Sanford Hall in the Twin Cities, Keel Hall and Spooner Hall on the Crookston and Morris campuses, respectively. There are, if I'm not mistaken, as of today, 33 buildings that are more than 75 years old. And so we can't do all of that all at once. There is going to be a lag while we work through this first group. And I will say with full vulnerability that as much effort that went into anticipation and a lot of effort went into anticipation, I am sure we will learn some lessons as we go through this the first time. And we commit to you to be very open and transparent about those bumps should they occur. And with appreciation for your help as we think about how to make this a functional and smooth process. So the group was decided, these 4 in consultation with all university honors, starting with them first as we work through the list. They have capacity constraints, as do we all. So take a peek at their website, but I'll note for your specific information that the recommendation to nominate someone to be part of a new chapter in namings, or to suggest that the committee consider that one or some or all in any combination of these 4 should have their name retained. Those submissions are due by November 11th. With the intention to give the committee plenty of time, but also all of you plenty of time should you be inclined to make such a submission, hopefully at minimal burden. So after submission and review of these requests, all of this will come through committee for discussion by the end of this upcoming academic year. So much appreciation to all university honors. And Erin, you will see, has put into the chat the link to this information that I was referring to. The next administrative process that I want to talk to you about is PEAK. So PEAK, for those of you who may be new to the Senate, stands for Position for Alignment, Position for Excellence, Alignment, and Knowledge. It's everything has to have a cute acronym. The point of PEAK is to look at our administrative functions and try to find consistent and responsive and timely ways to perform those functions in order to provide better service, and ideally also to provide some savings by virtue of economy of scale. This is a big part of MPAC 2025 in an environment where state support has been challenging and where we don't want to raise tuition, and yet our expenses go up, our salary expectations go up, and other expenses go up. We look to PEAK to help us find the ways to identify the resources while also finding ways to provide better and better service. And we do think that those 2 things are the 2 outcomes that we expect to see. So this is already 2 years in on this process, lots of consultation to guide the development and design of PEAK. This will bring, we absolutely believe, an increased collaboration and a continuous improvement philosophy. There are sectors within the function of the institution where we are focusing our attention: human resources, finance and procurement, IT, and then marketing and communications. We are just now at the point after 2 years where things are actually starting to happen. And so that's very exciting. It's also very anxiety inducing, and we understand that. Please ask your questions if you are feeling as if you need another run through from the PEAK leadership or from the steering committee. Just ask and we'll set that up. But I want to be very clear about something. We're at a historical low in administrative support headcount. This is not some sort of behind the curtain layoff opportunity. That is not the intention here. On the contrary, we probably need to hire in order to meet our needs. But when we do hire, and as we think about the work that each person does, we want to make sure that we're lining people up for professional fulfillment, clarity of responsibilities, consistency, and service provided. And so we need to take a holistic look to make sure that that's happening. The consultation is ongoing. We are certainly not done with that. And as with the university namings process, we will learn as we go together, and we will regroup as we need to, as we learn the lessons that we're likely to learn. So very grateful for your support and participation in this process. I mentioned just a moment ago PRISM. So PRISM is the President's Initiative for Student Mental Health. Last month, I attended their retreat. Lots of progress there and what we can expect over the next year, including, I'm very excited to report a partnership with our new Masonic Institute for the Developing Brain. The Institute has matched some of the funds that PRISM had, which now enables a $100,000 pool for seed grants for faculty research into underlying cause and related research questions. PEAK and PRISM, I must need an afternoon coffee, my own acronyms coming to haunt me. PRISM has also been a part of the inspiration behind our acquisition of a new tool that's called YOU at UMN. This is an app, personalized wellbeing portal, system-wide, and it saw a 174% increase in new registrations over the summer. Effective communication of resources is a big part of PRISM, so we're really gratified to see that kind of engagement. Some other developments with PRISM. There's a partnership with the Center for Educational Innovation to develop a common set of classroom practices to support student mental health. And PRISM has endorsed a new training module for faculty and staff that helps with allyship and responding to student distress, including student suicidality. I know many of you have asked us how you can learn more. It's a very short training module, but super helpful. And I very much encourage you to take advantage. This is really transformational work, necessary, impactful. It's a national conversation, but this is really setting the bar nationally. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this work unfolds and what it means in terms of support for our students and our community as a whole. So I thank you all very much for embracing it. Some fun news. As you may have heard, a couple of years ago, the university joined with Special Olympics Minnesota and a variety of other community partners to bid for the 2026 Special Olympics USA Games to be hosted here in Minnesota. It was a national competitive bid process. And this past May at a press conference at Huntington Bank Stadium, we had CEO Dave Dorn, Governor Walz, United Health Group CEO Brian Thompson, and me along with some other honored guests. And we were very delighted to announce that we won that bid and we will be hosting the 2026 Special Olympics USA here in Minnesota and specifically at the University of Minnesota. So over that summer, we will be able to make our athletic facilities available, housing, facilities for coaches, families, fans, supporters. It's a big event. I had the incredible honor of escorting our student athletes in from Minnesota at the 2022 games, which were in Orlando. And it's as fantastic and fulfilling and gratifying and soul feeding as you might expect. So can't wait for it to be here. There are a variety of things we will do in the meantime. Yesterday, we did our on-campus polar plunge, which I did. And now I don't have to do it again. I'm pleased to report, but lots of fun things that will gear up our community over the course of the next several years. So this is also really closely aligned with our commitment to inclusion. The values of equity, diversity, and inclusion are, as you might imagine, are very strong in the Games mission, which is to transform lives through inclusion and breaking down barriers. So we're very honored to be the host, and just let us know if you want more information or want to know about ways you could be involved, or you just want to know more. We would be happy to tell you. Earlier this month, the university celebrated the anniversary of our partnership with the University of Iceland. We have lots of partners internationally. You know, we have this tremendous work that we do globally, but we are the University of Iceland's oldest international partner. And so this is for them the 40-year anniversary of doing international collaboration. And we have this fun attribute in our MOU with them that every 5 years, we have a back and forth where the leadership of the institution goes in person to re-sign the MOU. So it was our turn to host. And so a whole delegation from Iceland came for that ceremony and to meet with many of you. They were also the University of Iceland leadership, our pathway into the Aurora Network, which is a European Union funded group of European universities that are committed to measuring their impact through the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Part of our strategic plan metrics are aligned with and embrace the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we are the only US university in that work. For now, we would be delighted for more to join, but we were the inaugural US university to become a part of the Aurora Network, which is really great partnership and collaboration. So they're a great partner, and I encourage you to learn more if you've ever been curious about working with them. So week after next, we will have the October Board of Regents meeting. Just a heads up on the things that are on the agenda. In mission fulfillment, we'll talk about the enrollment strategy for the Morris campus. Crookston presented in September, and each of the campuses will give an update over the course of the year. And there will be a graduate education update as well. The Finance Committee will discuss the university's biennial budget request and 6-year capital plan. And there will also be a discussion of the cost drivers behind in IT and the investment we're making there. And then 5 minutes into her work, Mercedes will present on the scope and impact of DEI related efforts across the university system. So, nothing like getting started at a sprint, but she's ready. So that should be a really informative presentation. So that concludes my report. I'll go ahead and jump to Q&A. And we did receive one question in advance about the Morris search. So let me go into a little detail on that. So thank you for the question. So we've been doing consultation leading up to the search. What kind of search? Just a very 30,000 foot first peek into what was needed. On the basis of that consultation, we launched a national search. It's a tremendous opportunity, and the Morris campus has this fantastic role within the system and on behalf of the state and far beyond that as a public liberal arts college. Very specific contributions to the system, to the state, and to the academy broadly in sustainability, campus diversity, civic engagement, of course, the liberal arts, very historic and complicated history in Native American affairs that has resulted in some really spectacular programming in the classroom and beyond the classroom and in the community as a whole. Pei Eng, who's the acting vice chancellor for academic affairs on the Morris campus, and Michael Rodriguez, dean of the College of Education and Human Development in the Twin Cities and a Morris alum, are the co-chairs of the search committee. And we've made a call for nominations. I'll mention that Morris policy has some very particular requirements around search committee composition, which we know about, acknowledge, and will comply with. In the course of receiving the nominations, we'll work with the co-chairs on constituting that committee, which we'll do in the coming weeks, some listening sessions over Zoom, in person, and also through anonymous surveys for those of you who prefer to provide feedback that way. Ideally, the work will allow for public interviews on campus, probably in the early part of 2023, with an announcement in the spring semester and the next chancellor starting over the summer. With great appreciation to Acting Chancellor Janet Erickson for her contributions and acts of leadership. She's tremendous. And I should mention very explicitly, a national search is in no way a restriction or limitation on internal candidates applying, or for you to nominate someone from Morris or from within our own university system as a candidate, we would be delighted. So that's the only question I received in advance. Chris, are there any questions from the floor?
I'm not seeing hands raised at this second.
Okay, well, it's not a quiz. If anybody has a question upon marinating in the presentation, please just ping me. You can ping me directly, you can ping me through the Senate office, you can ping me through however you would like to, and I would be delighted. So with that, I will turn it over. Our next item is the provost report. So I'll turn it over to Executive Vice President Provost Rachel Croson. Rachel.
Thank you, President Gable. Good afternoon, everybody. As President Gable mentioned, we have started the fall semester on all of our campuses. On the Twin Cities campus, we have over 80% of our undergraduate courses offered in person, about 20% offered in other modalities. Just as a benchmark pre-pandemic, we had about 90% of our courses offered in person. So this represents a pretty modest shift that I think is appropriate. And of course, each campus has its own distribution of different course modalities, but everybody seems very happy with where we've landed post-pandemic. I also want to express my gratitude to FCC and to SCEP for helping us to develop some syllabus language that instructors can use in describing how they will handle legitimate excused absences. So we are expecting that there's going to be more illness on campus in general this year, but also there's a heightened awareness that when one is sick, one should stay home. And so we're expected that, which is a good thing, but we're expecting that we'll have more student absences in our classes. And what we decided was really important was for instructors to decide how they were going to handle those absences. Were they going to offer a Zoom option? Were they going to videotape themselves? Should the students get notes from a friend, right? Kind of what their process was going to be, and in the way that was pedagogically appropriate for their course. and then to make sure they clearly communicated that policy to the students who were enrolled. And so the kind of template language that FCC and SCEP developed and that I sent out was designed to help instructors think about what they would do in the cases of student absences and ensure that that gets communicated clearly. So much gratitude to those bodies for helping navigate that. So far, we've had no COVID outbreaks, no monkeypox outbreaks. Our medical teams are tracking all of that. As you might have seen recently, there was an announcement from Boynton saying, please come in for your flu shot and for your bivalent booster. So, vaccinations are available on campus and at most pharmacies. I got mine at Walgreens. I just walked in. So I highly recommend it for those of you who have it. I did want to mention some things that were coming up for this year, just to kind of set the tone on things we would be talking about. So the Core Curriculum Committee continues its work this year. I'm optimistic that we might have a recommendation from them end of the academic year. They'll be bringing in some speakers. They've done some consultation, and they will, of course, continue with more consultations. So please do provide your input to that group. As you may have seen in the response to the resolution that was earlier in the agenda, in addition to providing a system for graduate students to spread out their fees, which we have done, we're also engaging in some benchmarking among other Big Ten public institutions of graduate assistant stipends by discipline. Those will be communicated to deans and associate deans. We're also looking at fees and what other institutions charge for fees, so that we can make sure that the packages we're offering to our TAs and RAs are competitive in our marketplace. In response to advocacy from COGS last year, we also formed the Task Force on Faculty Behavior in Graduate Education. They have submitted a set of recommendations. We're going to be sharing those recommendations with university governance this fall. Scott Landon is going to be starting with the AF&T committee, but we'll work through many of the committees. We are especially interested in your feedback. We hope to begin implementing those revised recommendations over the spring. And as President Gable mentioned, Dean Lanyon will be presenting to the Board of Regents our update we try to do every other year on graduate students at the university. In addition, some of you who are here may remember, you asked me to form a task force on disability accommodations in the learning environment. Last spring, that task force developed its recommendations, which were validated by this group, and we'll be implementing those recommendations this year. They're going to form the core of a quality initiative for the Twin Cities Higher Learning Accreditation, HLC, Higher Learning Commission Accreditation. That quality initiative is entitled Transforming Learning Environments in Support of Student Mental Health. It will draw on recommendations from that task force, on the great work from PRISM, especially the faculty work group, which is thinking about how we can adjust our learning environments to support student mental health, and on some recommendations that came out of the previous provost task force on student mental health, which has generated some really great feedback. I got the chance to talk at the retreat for the Academy of Distinguished Teachers recently about those recommendations. They had some really good insight and feedback, so we'll continue iterating on that front as well. And then finally, just a heads up, looking ahead to the very end of the school year. As you know, most colleges hold individual commencement ceremonies at 3M Mariucci. That's really the only facility we have on campus that's large enough to accommodate an entire college. But this year, 3M Mariucci will not be available for commencements. And so I've been in repeated discussions with the deans about how we should adjust. And the current plan, which will be announced in the next week or so, is to host one giant undergraduate commencement in Huntington Bank Stadium, and then to have each department hold an individual ceremony for its students, so the students can walk across the stage and have their name called. The college, we didn't really have spaces that could host a whole college ceremony, but we have sufficient spaces to hold these smaller, more intimate departmental ceremonies. In addition, for professional master's schools, law school, medical school, pharmacy, they'll continue to hold their commencements as normal. But for PhD and research masters, we are also planning one enormous ceremony, again in Huntington Bank Stadium, with each department offering its individual ceremony to allow for a hooding of the candidates. So that will be a change from our typical practice, and it will be something that we will track, and we will do some post-commencement surveys. We will see how people feel about the new arrangement, and then once 3M Mariucci comes back online for June 2024, we'll decide how we want to proceed around our commencements. So now that we've jumped to the very end of the semester, I'm going to stop. But for the end of the year, I'm going to stop, but I'm happy to take questions from the floor.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So Rachel didn't receive any questions in advance. Are there any questions from the floor? Kelsey. There you go.
Thanks. I was just wondering if you could repeat the numbers of courses in different modalities.
Sure. So we have, let me pull up. So we have 80%, over 80% of our courses are in person. So both undergrad and all courses, actually. I think the strict number is 82.1%. I would have to get back to you on the distribution of the other modalities. As you know, we have 4 different modalities: in person, hybrid, remote, which means asynchronous, and I forget what it's called. It's not called distance, which is synchronous, right? And I can certainly send an update on all those different modalities.
Any follow-up, Kelsey? No, okay. Neville. There you are.
Just want to thank you so much for the updates. And a quick question, just out of curiosity, as a student senator, is what's going on with the 3M building that makes it unavailable for graduation, and the timing relative to any other part of the year, making it available to host the ceremonies?
Thank you, Neville. So my understanding is that they're replacing the ice maker, freezer, some facility there. Joan might know, have more details. Gable might have more
It's called a
details.
chiller.
Chiller.
It's ice. It's related to the ice. That's
all we got.
Get you the exact answer if you want, but if anyone else is curious, otherwise Neville will pop you an email and get you the exact answer. But it's the mechanics underneath the ice. Any other questions for the provost? Okay, thank you, Rachel. All right, the next item is the SCC report. I call on FCC Chair Professor Flaherty Manchester. Colleen.
Thanks, President Gable. So hello, everyone. My name is Colleen Flaherty Manchester. I'm a professor in the Work and Organizations Department at the Carlson School of Management, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the elected chair of the Faculty Consultative Committee this academic year, which then, given that role, I'm also serving as chair of the Senate Consultative Committee, known as the SCC. And if you're tracking kind of leadership transitions, I served in the vice chair of this position last year, working with then Chair Patterson from VetMed, and then Mark B. from CBS is the current vice chair of the FCC and SCC. So I just want to start by saying that I'm kind of fully aware how the experiences and events of the last 2.5 years have really affected all of our constituent groups, students, faculty, civil service, P&A employees, and have reminded us about the importance of the University Senate and shared governance. And so with that, I just want to share my commitment to you to learn from all the different constituents and understand their at times varied perspectives and priorities, in my role as SCC chair. So the main two things I want to talk about today in my report are first, kind of reiterate and share those changes underway to increase the transparency and inclusivity of shared governance. So you heard about this in the orientation that was earlier in the program today from the Senate staff. So these processes that are in place are in response to feedback that Senate office as well as SCC leadership has received from constituents, particularly in particular statements from some student senators, as well as a new business motion that was in the April 21st University Senate meeting that was around practices for leadership and potential perceptions of perceived overreach because of kind of some lack of transparency and inclusivity around the practices. So you saw from the Senate office that the new legislative tracking system is really a key tool for increasing transparency. So the idea is that this will increase the information flow to U.S. senators so you can understand what you're going to be voting on when you get to a University Senate meeting. In addition, it's also to increase inclusivity, because if you can see kind of how a process works and it's transparent, then we're hoping that'll also then increase feelings of inclusion and engagement by senators. So the other change I want to talk about is in terms of the Senate floor. So in the past, when a legislative action like a resolution was brought to the Senate floor, it was introduced and presented by the SCC chair. So that would be my role. And there's, potentially some, when that happened, they're presenting the resolution and maybe also presenting aspects of the consultation. And it could be perceived as the authors of those resolutions being kind of sidelined from that conversation, or potentially a perception of lack of impartiality. So we're, in response to that feedback, we are actually going to be asking authors to present their legislative action or present their resolution. And so on the floor, the resolution will be actually introduced by the chair of the meeting. So in this case, it would be President Gabel. And then the authors will present their content. And so this will give them the opportunity to really share the important background information that senators need to kind of understand the resolution. And if the SCC chair wants to weigh in on the consultation that was done, then they will do so in the same manner that another faculty member or student senator or civil service senator or P&A senator would, in terms of having that 2-minute turn taking. So I just want to really thank the Senate office for all the effort that went into these new practices and procedures, and just know that this is a work in progress. So we are trying these things out. We have effort behind them, and we think they're going to lead to improvements in terms of transparency and inclusion, but we are also open to feedback. And so I encourage you to, if you have feedback as this continues to roll out and it can be experienced this fall, to let me know, as well as the Senate staff know, and we'll be incorporating information and bringing it back to the SCC in the spring. So second, in terms of what I want to share today are some of the priorities of the SCC this year. So the first one I would say is public safety. So this has already been underway starting this summer. The consultative committee leadership has met with the office of the Senior Vice President Franz, Chief Clark, as well as Vice President Kramer, and trying to kind of, a lot of action was happening this summer around safety, public safety, and the newer Strategic Safety Advisory Committee. And I just want to say that I'm a member of that committee, as is the chair of the Campus Safety Committee, Professor Edgar Arriaga. And so we'll continue to participate in that committee and ask questions and react to ideas and kind of do some kind of real-time interaction on those topics. Other areas of priority for the SCC are those that are also affecting, I would say, constituents as employees. So this would be PEAK, University Wellness Program, and also elevating the importance of kind of a human capital investment perspective on the university in terms of developing and consulting on a longer-term compensation strategy for employees. So I just want to share that the consultative committee leadership, which are the chair and the vice chair of each of the consultative committees, we meet regularly, and I encourage you to reach out to your respective committees chairs about issues that are facing your constituencies in order for us to elevate those perspectives. And so finally, I just want to say, as a note of coordination, in the Faculty Senate today, we will be discussing a resolution from the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee concerning term faculty and faculty like P&A. So if you can view that resolution on the Faculty Senate docket that's connected to the University Senate docket, and it'll be discussion, and then a vote will be in the next meeting. And so if you're interested in listening to that discussion or participating through asking a faculty member to yield time, you can do so by attending the Zoom meeting. So that's the end of my comments.
All right, thank you, Colleen. The next item is Board of Regents policy appearances before the legislature and other public bodies. This policy has been revised and is presented for information. The next item is old business, and there is no old business for this University Senate. So we'll move to the next item, which is new business. So please note that any new business will be referred to committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting and present today. Is there any new business? Okay, seeing none, I would happily receive a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion? Rockton moves. Is there a second? Great, thanks, Jacqueline. Any discussion? All right, we can initiate the poll.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 161 ayes and 2 nays, that motion prevails.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to announce it is 3:40. I'm just going to take a little point of privilege and ask the Senate office, do we need to wait to start? No, we're going to start at 3:50, so 10-minute break. And everyone who is inclined to rejoin at that time, please do so when we will call the Faculty Senate to order at 3:50. So thank you all very much. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I call this meeting of the Faculty Senate to order. Our first item is to approve a special rule limiting each speaker to 2 minutes each time they're recognized. A 2/3 majority of those present and voting is required to approve the special rule. Is there any discussion? Okay, host, if you could initiate the poll, please.
Give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 86 ayes, 2 nays, and 2 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you. Next item concerns administrative responses to Faculty Senate actions and is presented for information. There are none pending this time around. The next item is approval of the minutes from the Faculty Senate meeting of April 21st, 2022. We have a motion to approve. Chris, if you could initiate the poll.
Give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 87 ayes, 0 nays, and 5 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you. The next item concerns Board of Regents policy on commercialization of intellectual property and is presented to the Faculty Senate for an advisory vote. Before we get to that, though, I'd like to call on Rick Hipsch, who's the Executive Director of the University of Minnesota Technology Commercialization Effort, who will explain this item. Rick?
Thank you, President Gable. And I don't know if I can, yeah, there we go. Perfect. So I just want to provide a little bit of context and then open it up for discussion, just as a little bit of framing. So first of all, if you can go to the next slide, this is a standard process that we're going through, a standard review. It's not a special review, but it's a periodic update. But just as a background for some who aren't familiar, our office is part of the Office of Vice President of Research, and our mission is to facilitate research innovations, the transfer of research innovations, with the 3-part mission being benefiting the public good, economic growth, and generating value for the university's mission. Within our office, we have a team of professionals, and our delegations of authority are to file intellectual property, to license intellectual property, to start and support those companies, and to process the revenue that would come from the commercialization of intellectual property. Next slide. So the 3 main policies that drive our authorizations, the relevant policies are the one we're going to talk about today, the commercialization of intellectual property rights. There's also a Board of Regents policy for copyrights that covers a little bit about what we do, but all of what university researchers do. And then there's an administrative policy, not a board policy, but administrative policy, which we've recently updated on inventions and software arising from research. And up in the right corner, if you don't know, that's our website. So next slide, please. And just as a timeline, there were many policies that were in place many years ago, and those were kind of combined or put into a collection of policies all into this policy in 2007. And there have been periodic updates in 2010, 2014, 2015. And really, as I said earlier, it's a subject of the delegations that were given, but basically the policy is designed to assert, just like many universities or most universities are, when universities that have tech commercialization teams, to assert universities' ownership of the intellectual property, to make sure that students' ownership of their own intellectual properties rests with the students, and then to basically be part of the administration within the university that commercializes this intellectual property. We do startups and many other things, and it's really part of, or especially for the federal research, part of the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980. And many, many universities have technology transfer efforts. Next slide, please. So during this consultation process, we've worked with the Board of Regents office as well as OGC. We've worked with specific faculty just to get their feedback on the changes. And then we've been going through review with all of the committees. And this basically is saying that thus far we've gone to the Council of Research Associate Deans, Faculty Senate Research Committee, and the Faculty Consultative Committee. We're due to go to the Board of Regents in a couple of weeks, pending this discussion today and working with the Faculty Senate. So we're thus far, each of those bodies that we've talked to have agreed and endorsed the changes. And so the next slide really outlines the 4 changes, and we'll talk through those today if any questions that you might have regarding those. One was that we actually took the time with OGC to basically improve the readability, and in many cases less is more. And so we rearranged some of the sections, but also simplified the text. We put in a definition for research data, and specifically as part of patent commercialization of patented inventions. So that was an add. And again, it's very consistent with what we've seen both at the universities. Research has changed, but also what we've seen at other universities. We changed or are proposing a change to increase universities' discovery capital program investments, basically the cap from 1.05 million to 1.5 million per company. And then there were a few clauses of text that concerned the University of Minnesota actually having a controlling stake in private companies, which really doesn't happen. So there was several pieces of phrasing in the previous policy or the existing active policy, which we believe to be extra and which we believe can be removed. And so with that, those are the 4 changes that we want to talk about. In general, we feel that they're small changes. When we reviewed them with the other committees, we also felt from their perspectives that they were not fundamental changes, but important changes, again, for these 4 points. And with that, I guess I would open it up for questions.
All right. Thanks, Rick. Any questions for Rick? Or discussion? Carl. You're muted, Carl.
Thank you,
There
Joan. Yeah, so just a quick question. Do any of these changes, I see that this is addressing technology. Do any of these changes have any impact or contemplate impact in terms of the creative arts and creative research, like performances, plays, scripts, things of that nature?
Carl, there aren't any changes that would either increase or specifically address those. That being said, our office does get involved when researchers and faculty are interested in doing some sort of technology transfer, whether it's commercial or non-commercial. We can certainly help with that, but the policy itself, those types of things are governed by the copyright policy, and there's no change in what is considered academic works, which is kind of one of the qualifications I think you're talking about, or whether it's university-owned intellectual property. But again, we're open for business if you do have any of those interesting technologies. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Hi, Ellen.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Ellen Messer, David O, English Department, CLA. Yeah, I was concerned about humanities scholarship too, those of us who publish books and articles. And I'm also wondering about syllabi. Some universities have claimed ownership of course syllabi that faculty themselves develop.
Yes, no, it's a good question. And there is some interplay between this policy we're discussing and the copyright policy. We have made no changes to the copyright policy. And there is a clause in this particular policy that says only to the extent allowed in the copyright policy, this policy allows commercialization. So again, anything that you had previously as qualified as an academic works as part of your coursework as a faculty, that doesn't change. That being said, as I mentioned earlier to the earlier question, we have helped researchers who want to commercialize or share their syllabi or coursework with other institutions, whether they're other academic institutions, other public institutions. We have helped in the commercialization of those, but we are not making any changes to the ownership. That's governed by your copyright policy.
Thank you.
I may just insert myself for a second, if I may, as sort of tangentially related to your point, Ellen, is some of you may have seen that there's litigation occurring in Florida, specifically related to your question, Ellen, although broader, in fact, not just claiming ownership of the syllabus, but calling the question of who is speaking, whether it is you as an individual or whether it is the state when you are teaching at a public university. There's nothing like that happening here, either in the legislature, in the courts, or from the administration. And we are watching that case very closely. That case, that response that's generating this, I mean, I think alarm might be the appropriate word, is just hit. And so I know our general counsel was just at a conference on this, where everybody's trying to get their arms around the First Amendment implications. I don't see it having any effect here because it would be state by state law, but we will track it very closely. And if there's anything that would warrant a presentation or bringing OGC in for a discussion or a First Amendment expert in for a discussion, obviously we're happy to do that as things unfold. So just to, okay, thank you. Jonathan.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you all again this year. Rick, thanks for joining us today. I'm a biomedical engineering professor in the College of Science and Engineering. I use he, him pronouns. I just wanted to ask you if you could clarify the third point, explain to us what that means exactly so I can communicate that more effectively to my colleagues.
Sure, I will go grab it so I make sure I'm answering the right. The third point is to increase support for university startups by increasing the per company cap that we can invest from 1 to 1.5 million. And so that's historically, I think it was 2014 or 2015, the university introduced a program called Discovery Capital, where we took some of the proceeds from prior commercialization efforts, and we were able to invest them into companies that were spawned out of the University of Minnesota. So it's University of Minnesota money going into university startups. And we're not trying to become a venture capitalist, but we are trying to, and by the way, that program actually requires matching funding and support from another investor. So what we're saying there is, instead of supporting our startups up to a cap of 1.05 million per company, it's 1.5 million per company. So it's still in the area of investment, that's still a small amount. But in general, we just wanted to have that number increased, and we have never exceeded the previous amount, and that's the background.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Colleen.
Thank you, Colleen Flaherty, Manchester, Carlson School and FCC Chair. So thank you for presenting this policy. When we came to the FCC, there were a few questions that came up. The one that I wanted to follow up on is the addition of the research data to the policy.
Yes.
And there was a question around kind of subsequent use of that research data by faculty, particularly if they left the institution. So I wasn't sure if you were able to bring that question back to your group, or kind of what you learned from that.
Yes, that's a great question. And so if you look at the guiding principles of there's two points to that will let me back up a minute. Let me clarify what your question was and what the issue was. There was a question on whether university researchers after a commercialization effort, would be able to continue using that research either at the University of Minnesota or if they would go to another institution. And so the two supporting things, we decided after consulting with OGC not to make an additional change after we had talked to you in the FCC. And the reason for that is twofold. One, in the guiding principles, it talks about specifically, I don't have it right in front of me, either bullet 2 or 3 of the guiding principles, it mentions that we do not want to impinge on the academic freedom of the researchers and the ability to continue their research. That's point 1. Point 2, in all of our licenses to companies, whether they're startup companies or existing companies like Ecolab and Medtronic, all of our licenses have a reservation of rights for the researcher to continue to use that technology. Even if it's licensed to an outside institution, the university has the ability to continue to use that research. So we didn't feel like we had to add that to the policy because, first of all, it's in the guiding principles, and second of all, it's in all of our license agreements.
Thank you.
Okay. David.
Hi, this is David Morse from the College of Science and Engineering. I'd just like to ask you to comment on, and this is somewhat more general than the specific changes that have been made, on the relationship between the university's claim of intellectual property rights and technical software that faculty sometimes write, faculty and students. Specifically, I'm in the situation, and I think other people are, of wanting to give it away, of just wanting to make the software open source. You know, there's a great deal of technical software that, you know, the writer may think has no commercial value, but it's not clear to me when we need to consult with the university before posting it publicly and declaring it open source.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that comes up quite often, and you might argue is in that gray area that you mentioned. So there's a couple of answers. So first of all, student software is owned by the students. The students can do what they want. A small fraction of the students decide that they actually want our help, and then they will assign their software to the university or other intellectual property, but that's very rare. Secondly, if it's a faculty academic work, and that would be covered in the copyright policy, then that would be governed by the same copyright policy as potentially as your syllabus and your coursework. What we're looking at is it federally sponsored research or state sponsored research, and there's a for sure if it is patented and copyrighted. So some of the software can have algorithms that are patented. If it's patented and copyrighted, then it would be governed by the policy. If it's not patented, in our minds, we want to enable the transfer of this technology. We support open source all of the time. When in doubt, if you have federally sponsored research, contact our office. We'll help you. And we have, whether it's GitHub, whether it's an open source license, we do combination licenses where it's free for academic, fee for corporations to use your software. There are a lot of options to that, but the policy, back to your question, the policy that governs that would be the copyright policy, unless you would go through patent. And like I said, when in doubt, just give us a call.
Just a quick comment. It would be nice to know that there was some sort of threshold of some small bit of software or some circumstances where we didn't have to consult you. People produce a lot of small bits of software, and I don't think it's practical to consult you about absolutely everything. And I just ask you to think about that if there's a way to clarify that.
Yeah, and there is that other administrative policy. So in the slides, that the third example was the university's policy on inventions arising from software. So there is some messaging in there, and we worked with Research Associate Dean Joe Constant on that. I mean, he himself is a software person, so he helped us formulate that. And but we'll take a look at that and maybe work through Joe to get you the information.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jerry, you're our last question.
Yeah, last, maybe not least. So I have a very technical point. I was just reading through this, and there's one category that's missing from here, and that is that of emeritus faculty. We're not exactly visitors and are not university employees. And so I just want to make sure, I actually have an emeritus faculty working with me, so I want to make sure that he's covered in this.
So I'm gonna read it because it's very short, but then we can talk about it and maybe have to follow up with OGC. But it says inventor means an individual who's employed by the university who used substantial university resources, which is a defined term, and or otherwise subject to this policy. And visiting instructors and researchers, postdocs, and other fellows and students are subject to the policy and subject to its exclusions.
Yeah,
And
so
I
emeritus
just-
faculty are not employees. They're not necessarily visitors because they've already been here. And I mean, maybe it's covered, I'm not sure, but we have a substantial number of emeritus faculty, and I just want to make sure that.
Right, then that's good. Substantial university resources is covered by number 5 or sub
Yeah.
D5, and I'm not going to read it because it's a longer phrase.
No, I mean, I understand that. I just wanted to, it's a gray area that I think in acknowledging the special function that our emeritus faculty play within the university, it should at least be clearly spelled out if possible. I just want to throw
Okay.
that.
And whether we add it explicitly or we find out through the general counsel's office that it's qualified under one of these other clauses, we will take a look at that.
Yeah, my role isn't to argue, it's only to point it.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Yep.
All right, thanks, Jerry, and thanks, Rick. And I'm going to make this same offer on your behalf as you marinate in this, colleagues. If you have follow-up questions, just let Rick know or let us know, and we'll pass the question on to him. So thanks very much for your presentation, Rick, and for the ensuing discussion. Okay, next is the FCC report. I'm going to call on our chair, Professor Flaherty Manchester, to give this report. Colleen.
Thank you, President Gable. So I've introduced myself already to this group in terms of the University Senate, but I am the chair of the Faculty Consultative Committee as well in that role. And so I wanted to share the priorities of the committee in the year ahead, as well as kind of reiterate some of those operational changes that I mentioned around transparency and inclusivity. So in terms of the 3 areas to shape our work as an FCC this academic year, the first is around faculty reinvestment. In its consultative capacity, the FCC is charged with learning about and studying and advising the administration on issues concerning faculty. And the FCC has heard from you as senators, as well as the other, regular faculty members about the challenges of the last 2.5 years. We had many opportunities to hear from you. We had the town hall. We heard from you as senators about experiences in your unit. We had a forum in the spring where we are focusing more on forward-looking relationship between faculty and the university. And then we also kind of looked to you this summer to kind of help us take all that information that we gathered and how to prioritize it. And so with that, 3 things have emerged in terms of the priorities. So the first would be compensation issues. The second would be formal and informal service work to the university. And third, the need to support time for big work, research, creative, etc., writing. So we're actively working on these 3 areas, and you should expect updates in these areas from us as the year progresses. The second thing I wanted to share for the committee's work this year is kind of in its steering capacity, really taking a look at fixed term faculty. So term faculty and P&A-like P&A employees doing faculty-like work have been a priority of the FCC in recent years. And with that came a task force that recommended, a new subcommittee focused on issues of those employees. And it is under the Senate Committee on Faculty Affairs, known as SCAFA. And so the FCC will be kind of working with SCAFA and understanding how that subcommittee is doing in terms of operating, and kind of working with SCAFA to kind of elevate the topics and concerns that are coming from that subcommittee. In addition, today you'll also hear Senate committee activity from the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee on academic freedom of that employee group. So again, term faculty and faculty-like P&A, presenting a resolution around academic freedom, as well as the kind of the tracking of the kind of numbers of individuals who are in those roles. So third, the other thing that we're really thinking about is how to demonstrate the value of shared governance to faculty. This is a kind of a university-wide issue as well. Our other constituents are similarly facing challenges in recruiting towards service roles in shared governance. So this is at the local level, so your collegiate level, as well as university-wide. And so as FCC, we're kind of actively reaching out to faculty groups this year to really increase that communication flow and discover opportunities for partnering. And we're looking for additional ideas on kind of bi-directional communication. So one that we are specifically doing and trying out is we're adding questions to the FCC chairs, or questions or comments, I should say, to the FCC chair in the Faculty Senate meeting. So that will happen shortly. But I wanted to just say that this is a direct opportunity for us, for me, as well as the committee, to listen to faculty. And if you have questions, I'll do my best to answer those, but know that I might need to do some more research before I get back to you. So just to summarize the priorities, it's faculty reinvestment, coordinating with the Senate committees on fixed term faculty topics, and then demonstrating the value of shared governance. And so the operational aspects I want to just reiterate were the transparency and inclusivity. So you heard about the resolution tracking system that the Senate office is running. And then my comments around how resolutions and legislative action would be introduced and presented on the Senate floor. So today you'll get to see that in action in terms of the resolution authors presenting their resolution. And, as an FCC, chair, if I'm going to kind of weigh in on that, I will do so as a kind of a regular question or a commenter during the Faculty Senate. So that's what that's what I have today. And so I guess I'll turn it back over to you, President Gabel, to open it up for questions or comments.
Okay. As it queues up, Karen, you're up. Good to see you.
Hi, Karen.
You're muted. Sorry.
Okay, I'm not positive I'll be able to say what I have to say in 2 minutes, so I may ask somebody to cede their time to me. But I want to say that I appreciate hearing from you, Colleen, about the faculty reinvestment and the processes that were happened this past summer, because I do want to say that it has felt like that's sort of fallen off the radar, and I think there continues to be lack of recognition of how much demoralization and lack of trust there is among the faculty vis-a-vis the administration. And this is the point that I actually wanted to bring up, is that my comment for the rest of the things that I want to say have to do with the masking policy and the communication that we got from the FCC about recommended language for our syllabi, which I don't agree with the policy. I think it's unethical. I thought the language that we were asked to put on our syllabi, or encouraged to put on our syllabi, was deeply problematic. Some of it would have been a lie for me to put on my syllabus. And I'm reminded, and I'm paraphrasing here, of Hubert Humphrey's point from Pearl Buck earlier, that the moral test of an administration is how that administration treats its most vulnerable members. And while most of us were vaccinated.
Karen, 30 seconds.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to ask somebody to cede their time. Will anybody cede their time to me? Okay, thank you, Ben. So most of us who are vaccinated and get COVID will experience something between a serious cold and a serious flu. That's already a wide range of seriousness, but some will have long-term and extremely serious consequences, including death. COVID is today one of the top 3 causes of death in the US. Yesterday, 1,312 people died. The rolling average, 7-day average, is 469 people. For some groups, it's the top #1 cause of death. A friend of mine's previously completely healthy 22-year-old niece recently collapsed from a post-COVID heart bleed. She now has a permanent heart condition and a kidney failure. She is on the list for a kidney transplant. None of us know who amongst us, ourselves, our students, our family members, who we could expose is vulnerable to these kinds of consequences. What it feels like is that the administration simply does not care, or is overly lawyering this, or thinks that the numbers are, or the risk is small enough that it doesn't matter. And these are truly shocking compromises. And as I say, I think they are unethical. And I just think that needs to be on the table. And this is the only space where we can talk to faculty from other colleges. So I want to put that on the table. Maybe everybody disagrees with me, and that's fine. And I'll listen to that. But I just think this is the only place where we can talk to each other about this. And so I wanted to bring it up.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. I mean, I think that I heard a lot from what you were saying, and I appreciate you kind of sharing your frustrations with the syllabus language. You know, I encourage that feedback. You know, we are working within the policies of the institution, so we're not with that recommended language. We cannot mandate action, right? So we also hope that we were trying to be a guide, but also did not want to, you know, it's not a required syllabus language, but I do appreciate you raising those points and kind of using this forum for that.
Okay. All right, Jacqueline.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to ask this question. It's been a lot of conversations on past and about improving the climate at the working place for female faculty and staff. And I know this is perhaps more of a local level, but I feel it's an important issue. ADA just recently conducted a national, survey. And I felt by my own experience, perhaps, that it's very, very important to look into it, either creating committees that can monitor perhaps a little better on the working place, what's happening, and get the support that perhaps is needed.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Yeah, that's really important to hear. I know that one of the groups that we're hoping to connect with soon is the Women's Faculty Cabinet. So I think it would be good for us to connect, maybe, if you haven't done so already, reaching out to them with any ideas you have. But I think this is, climate and kind of how faculty are perceiving their workplace is definitely a priority for the FCC as a faculty concern.
No, I'm fairly new. I've only been 5 years here with the university. And I think my department is pretty much, dominated by a different gender. And I think presents some challenges, but I think with that in mind, I felt that it will be important to bring it up to the attention, the Senate, so we can perhaps, look into it and make a better situation for everyone. But I have not reached out to anybody, so this is the first time I bring it up. So
thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jacqueline. Other questions for Colleen? Okay, thank you, Colleen. So I have to apologize. I missed a step when Rick concluded his presentation. We do need to take a vote on an advisory vote on the modifications. So there's no need for a motion or a second for this type of vote. So before I ask Chris to initiate the poll, since I'm asking people to sort of abruptly shift gears back, is there anything anyone wants to ask or mention for Rick while he's on before we initiate that poll? Okay, Chris, you want to initiate the poll? Apologies again.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 81 ayes, 2 nays, and 15 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay. All right, thank you. And thanks, Rick. Sorry about that. Okay. Next item is a discussion of a resolution on academic freedom and term appointments. So this is on the agenda for discussion only at this point. I do want to give a preamble that we are instituting an alternating pro and con system for discussions like this in accordance with Senate rules, which state in deliberations, priority of recognition shall be given to senators over non-senators, speakers who have not spoken over those who have, alternation of pro and con on a specific issue. To facilitate this process, we ask that when you raise your hand, please send a chat to Chris Quapic to indicate whether your comment is pro, con, or neutral, such as a question or point of information. Because of this system, we may not go in the order that hands were raised. And also, please bear with us. This is a new process and is being managed manually. There's no way to automate this. So we're going to learn as we go. But this is in an effort to have a full and robust discussion. So also, in addition, as part of the new consultation tracking system, the chair of the meeting has been asked to speak to the consultation plan and what consultation has taken place. So for this resolution, the only recommended consultation was with the FCC, which took place on September 15th. So now it's my pleasure to call on Eric Van Wyk, who's the chair of the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee, who will present this item. Eric?
Thank you, President Gable. Yes, I'm Eric Van Wyk. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a professor in the computer science department and the current chair of the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee. And so I'm here along with my colleague, Professor Nadathur, to present this resolution regarding academic freedom issues and term appointments. So as I said, Professor Nadathur is here. He's the past chair. He asked that I just introduce him. And he's here to answer questions as well. So he was the chair when the statement and the resolution were conceived of, written, and approved. I'm the new chair starting this academic year. So he has a little more historical context than I do on some of these things. But as a bit of background, AF&T for the last few years has been discussing these kinds of issues about non-tenure track faculty appointments and issues around academic freedom, protections for those freedoms, and unfortunately often lack of protections around those freedoms for non-tenure track faculty, and then also the growing number of faculty in these kinds of appointments. So there were several meetings over the past few years, a wide range of people across the university, term faculty, regular faculty, various associate provosts and such. And so as last fall, October of 2021, AF&T wrote a statement that discussed in some detail the concerns that had sort of come up through these meetings. And that's a place to sort of go to get the most context and the history of the motivation behind the resolution. So part of those issues, right, of course, were the increase in number of faculty in these appointments, the fact that the tenure code offers partial and frankly quite weak protection for term faculty, and the tenure code doesn't even envision this sort of P&A category for what we sometimes call faculty-like positions. And so the tenure code offers no protection for people in those roles. So certainly, given the discussion in that committee and some of the things that were heard, the situation is untenable. It's something that has to be dealt with quite soon, I think, especially if the university is going to take academic freedom as something as a serious concern. So in April of this year, then it sort of became clear that the best course of action to sort of move this forward was to bring a resolution to the Faculty Senate to get some broader discussion on this. And so the committee created a draft. There was a Google document with lots of discussion between committee members. And after this sort of deliberation and consultation, the resolution was written. And then the committee voted unanimously to support that resolution. I'll note the legislative tracker says that it was a majority vote. That's not correct. It was a unanimous vote in AF&T. So, and so there's two components to the resolution, right? If you read it over, you have seen these. The first one is to create a task force under AF&T to focus on these issues. And there's two main things that are of interest there. One is to identify, the legitimate uses of these kinds of appointments. The tenure code pretty limiting in how these are supposed to be used. So identifying that, and then also articulate mechanisms for protecting academic freedom for term faculty who have, as we said, limited protections under the Board of Regents Tenure Code, and then P&A who are not mentioned there. So creating this task force is the first part. The second component of the resolution is to bring the university in line with what the tenure code stipulates now, which is that the administration report to ANFT the number of the positions, the appointments rather, that are non-tenure track that have been renewed for 7 years or more. Right, so this sort of reporting is described in the tenure code, but it hasn't happened for several years. And so this is something we need to sort of fix immediately. And so the point of the reporting is that in the interim, before the task force can complete its work, having these numbers reported is a critical thing. And so that's the second component of the resolution. Right. So as I mentioned, this was approved unanimously in the committee, but then also unanimously endorsed in the FCC meeting last week. That meeting seemed to me quite supportive, obviously, since it was unanimously endorsed. And the things that happened there were some changes to some language to clarify to some extent the scope of the task force's work, so that it's clear that it's not limited to strictly term faculty, but includes P&A faculty. And then also a couple minor things, but one also is to make it clear that it was the administration that's required to do this sort of reporting. And so the AF&T essentially felt that it was important to bring this to the Faculty Senate so that, for one, Faculty Senate is aware of these issues, but also for Faculty Senate and senators to take some ownership of this, be aware of the work that the committee is doing and wants to continue to do. And that's the reason we sort of brought this resolution forward. So that's my hopefully not too long introduction to this, and I'd be happy to take questions or such from anybody.
Okay, so thank you, Eric. So when and if you raise your hand, please chat Chris, and we will work our way through this new process. Any questions, items for discussion, feedback? All right, so Rajan, we're going to start with you. Does that work, Chris? Or actually, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to defer to Chris to call on speakers according to this process. Remove myself.
Yeah, thank you. So we have Rajan with a statement in favor.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Rajan Moon, and I am a faculty senator representing CCAPS. And I really appreciate the conversation and the advocacy for me and my colleagues who really fit into this category of academics, many of who have been at the U for decades, but we serve in settings or programs or colleges like CCAPS that don't have a tenure faculty track. We are dedicated to our students, our programs, our research agenda. So I really appreciate the conversation of the Faculty Senate, and hope that the conversations will move post-haste to some really good policies for my colleagues and I who are in this sort of limbo area of faculty, but not tenured faculty. So thank you.
Next, we have Elizabeth Hartman with a question.
Hi, so I have a question about the second part of this and the strict adherence piece specifically. So I'm curious about how the enforcement of this policy could play out in individual situations. So say there's a contingent faculty member who has been in a term position for 6+ years and their department is found to be in violation of this policy and is then reported. What's to stop the department from firing or simply not rehiring that contingent faculty member and replacing them with someone who hasn't been teaching for 6 years in order to abide by the policy. So I guess, in other words, how does the reporting mechanism help individuals in those already precarious positions? Thank you.
A good question, right? So the departments are not in violation here, right? Who the party in violation of the tenure code is the administration for not simply reporting and keeping AF&T updated on how many appointments there are in these categories that have lasted 7 years or more, right? So there's no sort of implied or no pressure on departments to somehow think that they need to remove people when they get to this point, because the reporting is not just for individuals that are in these appointments for this period of time, it's for the appointment themselves, right? So having a term faculty member or a PNA faculty member for 7 years or 8 years, even if multiple people have, for legitimate reasons, filled that role, that reporting is still to be done, right? So it's not about individuals, it's about the role existing for that period of time. Does that make sense and answer your concerns? Great, thanks.
All right, the next person is Ellen Messer-Davidow with a question.
Thank you. So I'm wondering if there's a broader discussion going on about term appointment individuals who actually teach, and many of whom have exactly the same or close to the same credentials as tenure track faculty. In other words, the terminal degree and publications and so on. Is there a broader discussion of the compensation they are receiving, whether it's competitive with other institutions, whether it's even a living wage, and also job security issues? In other words, multiple year contracts and so forth.
Yeah, I think there's, as we've heard, there's a lot of people interested in these concerns, and I think the new subcommittee under SCAFA, I think, it's sort of a broader focused committee, and I think those concerns would certainly fit in there. Our focus with AF&T is going to be, more closely tied to academic freedom, and certainly, having something like tenure is a guarantee that is how we sort of ensure academic freedom is protected. Right, but it's mostly on those academic freedom issues. So, but I agree. I think these are important issues. Gopalan, did you
say a few words? So Ellen, I'm Gopalan Narathur. I was the former chair. I played a fairly significant role in both the statement and also in the drafting of the resolution. I think to answer your question, Ellen, the focus is of the task force is to look into academic freedom issues, but it's also going to it should also be looking into what are legitimate uses of these term faculty appointments, and that has a broader scope than just looking at sort of how to protect academic freedom alone, right? So that might be the setting in which questions of the kind that you are asking might be addressed.
Next, I have Liz Stahl with a question.
Hi, I'm Liz Stahl. I'm a faculty center with the College of Extension. And anyway, I have a question, just one about if this would relate, because I fall under one of the PNA staff, but I teach, but we're considered faculty. We're annually renewable, but I teach in a non-traditional classroom. I teach with adults, I'm not on campus. So I'm just wondering, does this pertain to our situation? Because actually I had a question that just popped up the other day. There's a particular individual that wants to approve all of my team's presentations before we can give them at a program. And that raised red flags to me right away. I'm like, doesn't that go against academic freedom? For one thing is, like, for example, I've been doing this for 18 years with Extension. So anyway, that's my question. Does this also fall under people that are not in your traditional, campus classroom? We're teaching adults, but, we're considered faculty as well, but we're annually renewable. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. I would certainly want to consider those roles in this work, right? I think the task force would be looking sort of broadly, a broad interpretation of the word faculty, and would include people in the extension services. To the issue of, is it a violation of academic freedom to have someone be approving your presentations? I would, don't want to prejudge, but it certainly raises red flags, maybe is the thing to say. That would be the sort of thing that you please contact me, and this is something that the committee could also discuss, right? And you get more feedback from folks, and we could have a better, more involved conversation about that particular issue. But yeah, I would hope that all this work would take a broad definition of faculty.
Yeah, I appreciate it, because when I read this, I didn't really see that spelled out kind of or defined, but that's helpful to know that we can contact you about that, because there's a number of us that this involves. So
yeah, please do. So
thank you.
Next is Colleen Manchester with a comment.
Thank you. And this is kind of just to reiterate the, as FCC chair, so Colleen Flaherty Manchester, FCC chair, Carlson School of Management, reiterate the FCC's kind of unanimous support of this resolution. I think just want to make a comment around the consultation, I guess, that took place in terms of it spending a lot of time in the AF&T home committee and then going to the FCC prior to the faculty senate floor. And the reason for that is technically the AF&T committee could stand up as task force on its own. However, it's going through the resolution process because, as Eric mentioned, really trying to emphasize and kind of educate and get kind of the buy-in of the faculty around this issue. So I just wanted to kind of help people understand why it only visited the FCC on its way to the Senate floor.
The last person in the queue is Bo Hu.
Thank you. Bo Hu, faculty member in the Bioproducts Biosystems Engineering Department at CFANS. So I have two questions around this issue. First one is, I don't know where, does everybody have academic freedom, or this is the only limit to the faculty members? So, my question will be, do our graduate students who are mainly working on those research projects also have the academic freedom? My second question here is for those P&A, I'm not sure, every department, probably the policy might be different. Most of the P&A, they probably cannot advise the graduate student by themselves. They have to co-advise with a faculty member. They cannot write a grant as a single PI. They probably will have a faculty member as a PI. They can serve as co-PI. So they are working with a faculty member in most cases. So I don't know, from these two angles, I want to get some feedback, where is the limit for this?
So I think to your first question, graduate students do have academic freedom as well. It's not covered by the Board of Regents tenure code. But I'm not quite sure where it would be covered. There are a collection of policies on master's students and master's programs and doctoral programs. So I suspect that it is discussed in there. But that would be something I'd have to look into more to give you a better answer to that. And I guess in regard to your second question, I'm not quite sure, if there is someone who is working with a faculty member and someone is P&A and not a PI, or is a co-PI. I don't think there's any difference in those roles, right? That's sort of, bringing in grant money, as opposed to when one publishes or speaks, the academic freedom you have is sort of independent of your funding source, or if you're advising students. I think the academic freedom applies, generally to those categories. But it's independent of funding and advising of students. But maybe I misinterpreted your question, so.
Thank you. If our graduate students also have the policy to protect their academic freedom, I wholeheartedly support your approach to cover our P&A on their academic freedom. Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess one should add that this resolution is oriented towards faculty, right? It's not oriented towards and faculty of all stripes, right? It's not oriented towards graduate students. The Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee has discussed the issue of academic freedom for students. There was a discussion even as recently as spring 2020 on this issue. The questions are a bit different, and they might also be a little bit more complicated, right, than the way they apply to faculty, right? But it's again something that is under the purview of issues that the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee looks at. It might just not be part of this resolution.
And then we have Ned Patterson.
Hi, Ned Patterson, College of Veterinary Medicine faculty and past FCC chair. I just want to clarify briefly that under the Academic Freedom and Responsibility Policy in the University Policy Library and Addendum, the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee in 2011 wrote a white paper noting protections defined by the Regents policy extend to all university employees who engage in scholarly work. So there is some policies and other things that refer to this, and it does say extends to all university employees who engage in scholarly work.
Thanks, Ned.
And then Jerry Cohen with a comment.
Yeah, hi, Jerry Cohen, CFANS, Horticultural Science. Says I can mute myself. I just wanted to make a comment about questions about graduate students and non-tenure track faculty and faculty. Academic freedom is a lofty goal, which is actually beneficial not just to the individual, but to the institution. And in some of the conversation, we began to focus only on academic freedom as it pertains to an individual, but we lose sight of the fact that a robust university requires academic freedom for new ideas and scholarship to rise to the top. And the further that we extend academic freedom across the university, the better we are as an academic institution. And I think it's really critical that it be looked at both as a aspiration for an institution as well as a right of the individuals within the institution, because they're both critically important. And I don't want the conversation to be so focused on who has academic freedom and who does not. As an institution, the University of Minnesota wants academic freedom. At least I hope so. President Gable can answer that question, I guess. But I just think that the extending it as far and wide and with as big a curtain as possible is good for all of us. And that was just the comment I wanted to.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I certainly agree, right? It's what gives the university legitimacy is a collection of scholars that freely engage in their social or their scholarly endeavors, right? So it does apply to academic freedom, does apply. Everyone is sort of has academic freedom. It's sort of a question of what mechanisms do we have to protect that academic freedom, right? And so tenure is one of these mechanisms that some of us enjoy, but not everyone enjoys. And so what is it that we need to ensure that people who are on these non-tenure track roles have good, strong protections for their academic freedom? That's what the task force really wants to spend some time on.
Eric, there are no more questions. Did you want to make any closing remarks?
No, I think I'd just like to thank everybody for the time. I'd encourage you to read over the resolution and especially the statement that is linked inside the resolution. And if you have questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you about those by email or Zoom or in person. Yeah, thanks again for your time. I appreciate the comments and questions.
Okay, thanks, Eric, for the presentation, and thank you, Gopalan, for your input. All right, next item is the approval of revisions to 3 educational policies. So this is brought forth by SCEP. And so we don't need a motion or second. Is there any discussion? Jennifer.
Hi, thank you. Jennifer Goodnow, chemistry faculty on the Morris campus. And I have a super picky question about the probation policy, which is that 2.000 and 2.0 are different numbers in terms of how things can round. And I'm wondering if that was an intentional difference or if it was maybe just some oversight in there. And unfortunately, I based this on a situation we had where a student pointed out in a prior moment that 1.99 rounds to 2.0, but it doesn't cover 2.000. So I'm just wondering if that was intentional or not.
Yeah, so I'll speak to that. Tom Chase, Chair Senate Committee on Educational Policy. I don't know the answer to that question, Professor Goodnow. I'll have to research it, but it's a great question.
Other questions for Tom? Okay, with that, we can initiate the poll. Chris?
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 80 ayes, 1 nay, and 10 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you. And thanks to SCEP for that work. All right, our next item is old business. There's no old business for the Faculty Senate. So we'll move to new business. Please note that any new business will be referred to committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting and present. Is there any new business? Okay, seeing none, I would happily receive a motion to adjourn.
I would.
And second from Ben or Jerry or Jacqueline, you can choose, Chris. Thank you all very much. You want to initiate the poll?
Give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call.
All right. Thank you all very much. Thanks to everyone for your leadership and input. We'll see you all soon.